Join us for a heartwarming tale of unexpected love and second chances at Santa Aurora Farm, where a pregnant woman seeking refuge and a widowed farmer, haunted by loss, discover healing in each other's arms. This beautiful journey of hope, family, and redemption shows that sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive when we least expect them. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. The bus rattled along the dusty country road, each bump sending a wave of discomfort through Ana Clara's tired body. At 24, she never imagined she'd be here, 7 months pregnant, homeless, and heading to a job at a remote farm where no one knew her name or her story. As the bus slowed to a stop at the unmarked dirt road, the driver turned to her with concerned eyes. "You sure this is the place, miss? Nothing out here for miles but Santa Aurora Farm." Ana Clara nodded, struggling to lift her small backpack. "Yes, that's where I'm going." "Need help with that?" the driver asked, eyeing her rounded belly. "I can manage," she said, the words coming out sharper than intended. She'd had enough of pity to last a lifetime. The driver shrugged. "Suit yourself. Santa Aurora's about a mile down that road. Can't miss it." Ana Clara stepped off the bus, the hot afternoon sun immediately beating down on her. She adjusted her worn cotton dress and started walking, one hand supporting her lower back, the other clutching her backpack. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the journey. "Just a little longer," she whispered, patting her belly. "We're almost there." The farm appeared after a bend in the road, a large white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, surrounded by fields of corn and what looked like vegetable gardens in the distance. Several smaller buildings dotted the property. It was bigger than she'd imagined when she answered the newspaper ad seeking kitchen and garden help. As she approached the main gate, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair tied in a bun emerged from one of the smaller buildings, wiping her hands on her apron. "You must be Ana Clara," the woman said, her face kind but cautious. "I'm Rosa, the housekeeper. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "The bus schedule changed," Ana Clara explained, trying to hide how exhausted she felt. "I hope it's not a problem." Rosa's eyes traveled to Ana Clara's belly, then quickly back to her face. No problem at all. Come on in. You look like you could use some water and a sit-down." Ana Clara followed Rosa to the main house, taking in the simple but well-kept surroundings. The porch was lined with rocking chairs and flower pots hung from the ceiling. It looked peaceful, just what she needed. Inside, the house was cool and smelled of freshly baked bread. Rosa led her to the kitchen, gesturing for her to sit at a large wooden table. "The owner didn't mention you were expecting," Rosa said, pouring a glass of cold water. Ana Clara's hand instinctively went to her belly. "Is that going to be a problem?" Rosa paused, studying the young woman's face. She saw fear there, and pride, and something like determination. "Not for me," Rosa said finally. "But Joaquim, Mr. Mendez, he might be surprised." "The ad said room and board plus wages," Ana Clara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I can work. Being pregnant doesn't make me useless." Rosa's expression softened. "I never said it did, child. It's just that—" She stopped herself. "Well, Mr. Mendez will be back from the field soon. You can speak with him then." Ana Clara sipped her water, anxiety building in her chest. She couldn't afford to lose this opportunity. The little money she had saved wouldn't last more than a few days. "Is there somewhere I can freshen up?" she asked. Rosa nodded. "I'll show you to your room. It's small but clean, in the back of the house." The room was indeed small, just a single bed, a dresser, and a chair by the window. But it had its own bathroom, and the window overlooked a garden filled with sunflowers. Ana Clara set her backpack down and allowed herself a moment to breathe. "Thank you," she told Rosa. "Rest a bit," Rosa said, heading for the door. "Dinner's at 6. You can meet everyone then." Alone in the room, Ana Clara sat on the edge of the bed and finally let her shoulders slump. The baby kicked again, harder this time. I know," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "It's just for a while, my love. We can do this." She lay back on the bed, not meaning to fall asleep, but exhaustion claimed her within minutes. Joaquim. Mendez wiped the sweat from his brow as he walked back from the cornfields. At 30, he was in his prime. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly from the humidity. His hands were rough from work, and his eyes held a seriousness that made even his long-time employees hesitant. To joke with him, "Boss, we finished the south field," called Pedro, one of the farmhands. "Want us to start on the irrigation fix tomorrow?" Joaquim nodded. "At dawn. We can't risk losing any more crops if this drought continues." Pedro nodded and headed toward the workers' quarters, leaving Joaquim alone with his thoughts. The farm had been in his family for 3 generations, and now it was all he had left. That, and memories that still kept him awake at night. As he approached the main house, he noticed Rosa waiting on the porch, her expression telling him something was up. "What is it?" he asked, climbing the steps. "The new kitchen helper arrived today," Rosa said, keeping her voice low. "There's something you should know before you meet her." Joaquim frowned. "Is there a problem?" "She's expecting a baby," Rosa said. "Looks to be about 7 months along." Joaquim's face hardened. Babies, pregnancies, the very things he'd tried, so hard to avoid thinking about for the past 4 years. "You didn't say anything about hiring a pregnant woman," he said, his voice tight. Rosa sighed. "The ad didn't say we wouldn't hire one either. She needs the job, Joaquim. I can see it in her eyes." "This is a working farm, Rosa, not a charity. She says she can work. And you know we've been short-handed since Maria left." Joaquim ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his stance. "Fine, but if she can't keep up, then I'll handle it," Rosa finished for him. "She's sleeping now. Poor thing looked dead on her feet." Joaquim grunted and headed into the house, making for his study. The room was lined with bookshelves, filled with agricultural texts and the novels his late wife had collected. He poured himself a small glass of whiskey and sat at his desk, staring out the window at the fields that stretched into the distance. 4 years. 4 years since the accident that took Isabella and their unborn son. 4 years of throwing himself into work, of avoiding anything that might remind him of what he'd lost. And now a pregnant woman was sleeping under his roof. He downed the whiskey in one gulp and closed his eyes, willing the memories to stay locked away where they belonged. Ana Clara woke with a start, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The room was darker now, lit only by the fading evening light. She checked her watch, 5:45 p.m. She'd been asleep for nearly 2 hours. Quickly, she washed her face and combed her hair, trying to make herself presentable. She changed into her other dress, slightly less worn than the one she'd traveled in, and took a deep breath before opening the bedroom door. The hallway was empty, but she could hear voices coming from the kitchen. Following the sound, she found Rosa busy at the stove, with 2 younger women helping her. An older man sat at the table reading a newspaper. Rosa looked up as Ana Clara entered. "Ah, there you are. Feel better after your rest?" Ana Clara nodded, suddenly self-conscious as everyone turned to look at her. "Everyone, this is Ana Clara, our new kitchen helper," Rosa announced. "Ana Clara, this is Elena and Lucia. They help with the house and laundry, and that's Carlos, our foreman." Carlos nodded politely, while the 2 young women smiled and greeted her. Ana Clara noticed their eyes flickering to her belly, but they didn't comment. "What can I do to help?" Ana Clara asked, eager to prove her usefulness. Rosa seemed pleased by the offer. "You can set the table. Plates are in that cabinet, silverware in the drawer below." Ana Clara got to work arranging plates and utensils around the large table. As she worked, she felt a presence in the doorway and turned to find a man watching her, tall with intense eyes that seemed to look right through her. Even from across the room, she could feel an energy about him, like a storm barely contained. "Mr. Mendez," Rosa said, "this is Ana Clara." Joaquim stepped into the room, his expression unreadable as he took in the young woman's pregnant form. Ana Clara straightened her back, refusing to appear weak or apologetic. "You're the new kitchen help," he said. "Not a question, but a statement." "Yes, sir," she replied. "I can also work in the garden. I grew up on a small farm. I know my way around plants." Joaquim's eyes narrowed slightly. "Rosa says you're expecting." Ana Clara met his gaze steadily. "Yes, in about 2 months. But I can work until then and after a short recovery." "This isn't easy work," he said, his voice flat. "We're short-handed as it is." "I'm stronger than I look," Ana Clara said, a hint of defiance in her tone. "And I need this job." Something flickered in Joaquim's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "We'll see," he said finally. "You can start tomorrow. Rosa will show you what needs to be done." With that, he took his seat at the head of the table, effectively ending the conversation. Ana Clara finished setting the table, her heart pounding. She hadn't been dismissed outright, which was more than she'd gotten from her last employer. Dinner was a quiet affair. The farmhands ate quickly and returned to their quarters, while Joaquim barely spoke, responding to questions from Carlos about the next day's work with short, direct answers. Ana Clara kept her head down, eating the simple but delicious stew Rosa had prepared. After dinner, when everyone had dispersed, Rosa found Ana Clara washing dishes at the sink. "You don't have to do that tonight," Rosa said gently. "You should rest." Ana Clara shook her head. "I want to help and I want to stay busy." Rosa studied her for a moment, then picked up a dish towel to dry. "He's not always so cold, you know. Joaquim. He used to be different." Ana Clara said nothing, focusing on scrubbing a pot. 4 years ago, he lost his wife, Isabella, and their unborn child in a car accident. Rosa continued, her voice soft. "He hasn't been the same since. Hardly speaks unless it's about the farm. Never smiles." Ana Clara paused, processing this information. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "That must have been terrible for him." "It was," Rosa agreed. "But life goes on whether we want it to or not." She glanced at Ana Clara's belly. "The father?" Ana Clara's face hardened. "Not in the picture. And it's better that way." Rosa nodded, accepting this without pressing further. "Well, you're here now, and despite what Joaquim might think, we could use another pair of hands." When the dishes were done, Ana Clara returned to her small room and sat by the window, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. The baby moved inside her, gentle rolls and kicks that reminded her she wasn't alone. "It's just for a while," she whispered, echoing her earlier promise. "We can manage." But as she prepared for bed, Ana Clara couldn't shake the memory of Joaquim's intense gaze, or the pain she'd glimpsed beneath his stern exterior. A man who had lost a child, now faced with a reminder of that loss under his own roof. She placed her hand protectively over her belly. This job was all she had, the only hope for her and her baby's future. She wouldn't let anyone, not even a grieving, guarded man like Joaquim Mendez, take that away from her. The next morning, Ana Clara was up before dawn. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, determined to prove her worth. To her surprise, she found Joaquim already there, making coffee. He looked up as she entered, his expression guarded. "You're up early." "I want to start earning." "My keep," she replied, moving to the refrigerator. "I can make breakfast for everyone." Joaquim watched as she gathered eggs and vegetables, moving with surprising efficiency despite her condition. She felt his eyes on her but refused to be intimidated. "The men eat at 5:30, he said finally. "It's only 4:45. Ana Clara nodded, cracking eggs into a bowl. "Then I have time to make something proper. Back home I always cooked. For the field hands." "Where is home?" he asked, surprising her with the personal question. Ana Clara hesitated. "Nowhere anymore. Just here now." Something shifted in Joaquim's expression. Not softening exactly, but a subtle change nonetheless. He poured a cup of coffee and set it on the counter near her. "The milk's gone bad," he said. "Rosa will get more in town today." Ana Clara nodded, her thanks for the coffee, taking a small sip. The warm liquid was comforting, a small luxury she hadn't enjoyed in weeks. "Rosa says you lost your wife," she said, immediately regretting the words when she saw his body tense. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "No," he cut her off. "You shouldn't have." He set his coffee cup down with deliberate control. "Your room is satisfactory." The abrupt change of subject was clear in its intention. "Stay away from personal matters." "Yes," she answered. "Thank you." He gave a curt nod and headed for the door. At the threshold, he paused and turned back. "After breakfast, meet me in the vegetable garden. I want to see what you can do." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Ana Clara alone in the kitchen with her thoughts and the morning's tasks ahead of her. By the time Rosa appeared to help, Ana Clara had prepared scrambled eggs with vegetables, fresh bread from the previous day warmed in the oven, and more coffee. The farmhands came in from their quarters, surprised and pleased by the spread. "Been a while since we had a proper breakfast," Carlos commented, helping himself to a second serving of eggs. "You've got a good hand in the kitchen, miss." Ana Clara smiled, her first genuine smile since arriving. "My grandmother taught me. She said good food makes for happy workers." "Smart woman, your grandmother," Carlos replied, raising his coffee cup in salute. After the men had eaten and headed out to the fields, Ana Clara cleaned up the kitchen with Rosa's help, then prepared for her test in the garden. She tied her hair back with a scarf and put on the wide-brimmed hat Rosa insisted she wear. "Sun's brutal this time of year," Rosa warned, "and in your condition, you need to be careful." The vegetable garden was larger than Ana Clara had expected. Rows of tomatoes, peppers, beans, and herbs stretched across a quarter-acre plot. Joaquim was already there, examining plants and pulling the occasional weed. He straightened as she approached, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Rosa tells me you know gardens." "Yes," Ana Clara confirmed. "My grandmother had one about half this size. We grew most of our own food." Joaquim gestured to a section overrun with weeds. "That area needs clearing. The tomato plants need support. And those peppers need to be harvested." It was clearly a test. More work than one person, especially a pregnant woman, could reasonably accomplish in a morning. But Ana Clara just nodded and set to work, starting with the weeding. She knew better than to complain about having to squat awkwardly to reach the weeds, working her way methodically down the row. After an hour, sweat dampened her dress despite the morning's relative coolness. Joaquim had left shortly after giving his instructions, but she felt certain he was watching from somewhere, proving his point perhaps that she wasn't up to the job. The baby kicked vigorously, as if protesting the strenuous activity. Ana Clara paused, leaning back to ease the pressure on her spine. It was then she noticed Joaquim approaching, his face set in a frown. "That's enough," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ana Clara pushed herself to her feet, fighting a wave of dizziness. "I'm not finished. I can see that," he replied. "But you're not going to finish yourself into early labor either." She bristled at his tone. "I'm fine. I just needed a moment." "You need water and shade," he cut her off. Then, surprising her, he added, "There's no point proving yourself to the point of collapse. The work will be here tomorrow." Ana Clara stood her ground. "I need this job, Mr. Mendez. I won't let you send me away because you think I can't handle it." Something flashed in his eyes, anger, frustration, or perhaps something else entirely. "I'm not sending you away. I'm telling you to get some water and work in the kitchen for the rest of the morning. The garden can wait." Before she could respond, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Ana Clara standing among the half-weeded tomato plants, confused by his apparent concern. It wasn't kindness exactly, more like the same care he might show for a valuable piece of farm equipment, but it was better than dismissal. With a sigh, she gathered her tools and headed back to the house, where Rosa was preparing lunch. "He sent you back in?" Rosa asked, not sounding particularly surprised. Ana Clara nodded, pouring herself a glass of water. "He thinks I'll hurt myself, or the baby." Rosa's expression was knowing. "Joaquim has his reasons for being cautious. But don't mistake it for weakness, his or yours." That afternoon, Ana Clara helped Rosa prepare dinner, a hearty stew with vegetables from the garden and beef from the farm's own cattle. As they worked, Rosa told stories about the farm, how it had thrived under Joaquim's grandfather and father, and how Joaquim himself had modernized much of the operation. "Before Isabella died, he had plans," Rosa said, chopping carrots. "They were going to expand, maybe even start a small winery. He studied agriculture in college, you know. Has all sorts of ideas in those books of his." Ana Clara absorbed this information silently, piecing together the man who had seemed so cold that morning, a man with dreams once, a man who had loved his wife and their unborn child, a man who now lived like a shadow of himself. At dinner that night, she noticed Joaquim watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, not with the clinical assessment of the morning, but with something more complex in his gaze. When their eyes met briefly, he quickly looked away, focusing intently on his food. Later, As she prepared for bed in her small room, Ana Clara found herself thinking about Joaquim Mendes, his loss, his pain, his carefully maintained distance. She understood that kind of protection all too well. Hadn't she built her own walls after Diego abandoned her? After her former employers let her go with thinly veiled disgust? After neighbors who had known her all her life suddenly had nothing but judgment in their eyes? The baby moved inside her, a gentle reminder of both her vulnerability and her strength. Ana Clara placed her hand on her swollen belly. "We're going to be okay here," she whispered, "for as long as we can stay." As she drifted off to sleep, the image of Joaquim's intense eyes followed her into her dreams, not cold as she had first thought, but burning with a fire banked beneath layers of grief and control. A man fighting his own battles, just as she fought hers. In the darkness of her new room, with the scent of sunflowers drifting through the open window, Ana Clara slept more peacefully than she had in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight at least, she had shelter, food, and the promise of work. It would have to be enough. 2 weeks passed quickly at Santa Aurora Farm. Ana Clara settled into a routine. Mornings in the kitchen preparing breakfast and lunch, afternoons in the garden when the sun wasn't too hot, and evenings helping Rosa with dinner. Despite her growing belly, she worked efficiently, earning grudging respect from the farmhands and a quiet acceptance from Joaquim. On a particularly warm afternoon, Ana Clara sat in the shade of an old oak tree, sorting beans she'd harvested that morning. The baby was active today, pressing uncomfortably against her ribs. She shifted position, trying to ease the pressure. "You should take more breaks." The voice startled her. She looked up to find Joaquim standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable as always. "I'm fine," she said, automatically defensive. "Just sorting these for tomorrow's meal." Instead of walking away as he usually did, Joaquim surprised her by sitting down on a nearby stump. He was close enough that she could smell the earthy scent of soil and sun on him. "You've been here 2 weeks," he said. "Rosa says you're a good worker." Ana Clara's hand stilled over the beans. "Thank you." "Why?" "Here," he asked abruptly. "A pregnant woman alone coming to a remote farm. There must be easier places." She considered deflecting the question, but decided on honesty. "Not for someone in my situation." She met his gaze directly. "No one wants to hire a woman who's going to need time off to have a baby, and most places want references." "Which you don't have," he concluded. "I left my last job suddenly." Joaquim was silent for a moment. "The father." Ana Clara's face hardened. "Not worth talking about." "He abandoned you." "As soon as I told him about the baby." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. Turned out he was already married with children. Joaquim's jaw tightened. Some men don't deserve the title. Ana Clara looked at him with new interest. It was the most emotion she'd heard in his voice since arriving. "Did Rosa tell you I was fired from my job after that?" she continued, surprising herself with her openness. "My landlord asked me to leave because I couldn't make rent, and the neighbors—" She shook her head. "Let's just say small towns have long memories and short compassion." Joaquim's eyes narrowed. "So, you came here." The ad said no questions, asked room and board plus wages, and it was far enough away that no one would know me. She rubbed her belly absently. "It was my only option." Joaquim watched the protective gesture, something flickering in his eyes. "How much longer?" he asked, nodding toward her stomach. "About 7 weeks, if the doctor's estimate was right." She attempted a smile. "I'm hoping to work right up until it happens." "And after?" The question hung in the air between them. Ana Clara had been avoiding thinking too much about after. "I'll need a week or 2 to recover," she said. "Then I can work again. The baby can stay in my room. I won't let it disrupt anything." Joaquim studied her face. "I talk about your child like it's an inconvenience to be managed." Ana Clara flinched as if slapped. "That's not fair. I'm trying to be practical." "Babies aren't practical," he said, his voice suddenly tight. "They're messy and demanding, and they change everything." "You think I don't know that?" Ana Clara's voice rose slightly. "You think I planned this? To be alone with no money, no family. About to have a baby I have no idea how to raise." Tears threatened, and she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this man. Joachim's expression shifted, the hardness giving way to something almost like regret. He stood abruptly. "You can stay," he said. "After the baby comes, we'll figure something out." Before she could respond, he walked away, his broad shoulders rigid under his work shirt. Anna Clara stared after him, unsure whether to feel relieved or more anxious than before. That evening, unable to sleep despite her fatigue, Anna Clara wandered to the kitchen for a glass of water. To her surprise, a light was on. She found Joachim at the table reading a book, a half-empty glass of whiskey at his elbow. He looked up as she entered, closing the book. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head. "The baby's restless tonight." "There's herbal tea in that cabinet," he said, nodding toward a glass-fronted cupboard. "Rosa says it helps." Anna Clara raised an eyebrow at this unexpected consideration, but moved to prepare the tea. As the water heated, an awkward silence filled the kitchen. "What are you reading?" she asked finally, gesturing to the book he'd closed. Joachim hesitated, then turned the book so she could see the cover. "What to expect when you're expecting." Anna Clara couldn't hide her surprise. "That's not what I expected you to be reading." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Isabella and I had a copy. I've been refreshing my memory." She prepared her tea and, after a moment's hesitation, sat across from him at the table. "You must have been excited about your baby." Pain flashed across his face, but he didn't shut down as she expected. "We both were. We had the nursery all ready, yellow walls. Isabella thought it was more cheerful than blue or pink." "I'm sorry," Anna Clara said softly, "for what happened to them." Joachim stared into his whiskey glass. 4 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago. The precision of his count broke her heart a little. "Does it get easier?" she asked. "No," he answered honestly. "Just different. Some days I can almost forget, others." He trailed off. Anna Clara sipped her tea, understanding more now about his coldness, his distance. "And now I show up, a living reminder." He looked at her directly. "At first, yes, but now—" He seemed to be searching for words. "Now I think maybe it's something else." "Like what?" But Joachim shook his head, unwilling or unable to explain. He gestured toward her belly. "Have you thought of names?" The change of subject was obvious, but Anna Clara accepted it. "Not really. It feels, I don't know, like I shouldn't get attached yet." "Because you're afraid something will go wrong." She considered this. "Maybe. Or maybe because I don't want to plan for a future I'm not sure of." Joachim studied her face in the soft kitchen light. "You don't seem like someone who gives up easily." "I'm not," she agreed, "but life has a way of teaching you not to hope too much." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Hope is dangerous." "But we keep doing it anyway," she said softly. "Don't." "We." Their eyes met across the table, a moment of connection neither had expected. Joachim was the first to look away. "So you should try to rest," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Morning comes early." Anna Clara nodded and stood, taking her half-empty teacup to the sink. As she passed behind his chair, she paused. "Thank you," she said, "for saying I can stay after." Joachim didn't turn, but she saw his shoulders relax slightly. "This is a working farm, not a charity," he said, echoing his words to Rosa. "But even I know some things are more important than work." Anna Clara returned to her room, pondering this new side of Joachim Mendes, a man who remembered exactly how long it had been since he lost his family, who read pregnancy books in the dark of night, who offered her a future when she'd been afraid to hope for one. The next morning, Anna Clara woke to find a small package outside her door. Inside was a pair of gardening gloves, perfectly sized for her hands, and a wide-brimmed hat better than the one she'd been borrowing from Rosa. No note, no explanation, but she knew who they were from. At breakfast, she wore the hat as she served the farmhands their food. When Joachim entered the kitchen, she met his eyes briefly and nodded her thanks. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod in return before taking his usual seat at the head of the table. "Anna Clara's biscuits are even better than yours, Rosa," Carlos declared, reaching for a third helping. No offense, Rosa laughed. None taken. My mother always said I was better with a broom than a rolling pin. The easy banter continued around the table, but Ana Clara noticed Joaquim watching her as she moved about the kitchen, refilling coffee cups and bringing more biscuits. His gaze wasn't critical as it had been in her first days. Instead, it was thoughtful, almost curious. Later that morning, as she worked in the garden, Joaquim appeared again. This time, instead of merely observing, he knelt beside her and began pulling weeds from the adjacent row. You don't have to help, she said, surprised. I know, he replied simply. They worked in companionable silence for nearly an hour. Ana Clara was struck by how natural it felt, working alongside him, their hands moving through the same soil. Occasionally their arms would brush, and she found herself increasingly aware of his presence, the controlled strength in his movements, the focus in his expression, the way the sun brought out hints of amber in his dark eyes. When they finished weeding, he helped her to her feet. His hand was warm and calloused, his grip secure. Thank you for the gloves, she said. And the hat. Joaquim shrugged. Practical necessities. But there was something in his voice that belied the dismissive words. Ana Clara found herself smiling, a real smile that reached her eyes. Still, it was thoughtful. His eyes lingered on her face for a moment before he nodded and turned to go. But he paused after a few steps and looked back. I'm heading to town, tomorrow for supplies. Is there anything you need? The question held more meaning than its simple words suggested. It was an acknowledgement of her presence, her needs, her belonging, however temporary to this place. I could use some yarn, she said after a moment. If it's not too much trouble. I thought I might knit something. For the baby. Joaquim's expression softened almost imperceptibly. What color? Ana Clara hadn't expected the question. Yellow, she said finally. Like sunshine. He nodded once and continued on his way. Ana Clara watched him go, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't gratitude exactly, nor was it the desperate relief of her first days here. It was something quieter, something that felt dangerously like hope. The next few days brought subtle changes to Santa Aurora Farm. Ana Clara began leaving recipe notes on the kitchen counter, her grandmother's special biscuits, her simple stew that stretched ingredients without sacrificing flavor, ways to preserve the garden's abundance for the coming winter. Joaquim, in turn, started leaving books on the small table outside her room, practical guides to infant care, stories that had been his favorites as a child, even a worn volume of poetry. No notes accompanied these offerings, but none were needed. They still spoke little in front of others, maintaining a careful employer-employee distance. But in the early mornings or late evenings, when they happened to find themselves alone in the kitchen or on the porch, their conversations grew longer, more personal. Ana Clara learned about Joaquim's childhood on the farm, his education in agricultural science, his dreams for expanding Santa Aurora beyond its current operations. He in turn discovered her love of cooking, her talent for coaxing reluctant plants to thrive, her quiet strength in the face of abandonment and judgment. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ana Clara felt the baby kick particularly hard. Without thinking, she reached for Joaquim's hand and placed it on her belly. Feel that? She asked softly. Someone's practicing soccer in there. Joaquim's hand tensed for a moment, then relaxed against the curve of her stomach. When the baby kicked again, his eyes widened slightly. Strong, he murmured. Like his mother, Ana Clara said, then froze, realizing what she'd done, both the casual touch and the revelation. It's a boy? Joaquim asked, his hand still on her belly. She nodded. The doctor told me at my last appointment, before everything happened. A son, Joaquim said, and something in his voice made Ana Clara look up sharply. His face held a complex mixture of emotions, sadness, wonder, and something else she couldn't quite name. They stayed that way for a long moment, his hand on her belly, the evening breeze whispering around them, until the baby stilled, and Joaquim slowly withdrew his hand. Isabella loved this time of day, he said quietly. She used to say the world looked softer at sunset, Like all the hard edges got smoothed away, Ana Clara didn't respond, sensing he needed to speak without interruption. "I couldn't look at sunsets after she died," he continued. "Couldn't bear the beauty of it without her. I'd work until it was fully dark, or stay in my study with the curtains drawn." "And now?" Ana Clara asked gently. Joaquim turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "And now I'm sitting here watching one with you." The simple statement held volumes. Ana Clara felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them away, but not before Joaquim noticed. "I've upset you," he said, frowning. "No," she assured him. "It's just hormones, probably. Pregnant women cry at everything." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press the issue. As darkness fell, they went inside, each to their separate rooms. But something had shifted between them. A door opened that neither was sure could ever be closed again. The following Saturday, Joaquim surprised everyone by announcing that work would end at noon. "It's the annual harvest festival in town," he explained during breakfast. "Anyone who wants to go can take one of the trucks." The farmhands exchanged excited glances. The festival was apparently a highlight of the rural community's social calendar. "Will you come, Ana Clara?" Eleanor asked. "There's music and dancing and the best food you've ever tasted." Ana Clara hesitated. "I don't know if I should—" "You should come," Joaquim interrupted, his voice casual but his eyes intent on her face. "It would do you good to get off the farm for a day." Rosa, who had been quietly observing the exchange, smiled knowingly. "I've got a dress that might fit you, even with the baby. I'll bring it by your room." And so, despite her misgivings, Ana Clara found herself riding into town that afternoon, wearing a simple blue cotton dress that Rosa had altered to accommodate her belly. She sat in the passenger seat of Joaquim's truck, while the others followed. In the farm's older vehicle, "You didn't have to drive me personally," she said as they bounced along the dirt road. "I could have gone with the others." "I know," Joaquim replied, his eyes on the road, "but I wanted to." The simple admission hung in the air between them, neither uncomfortable nor unwelcome, just there. Like so many things that remained unspoken, the town was small but bustling with activity. The main street had been transformed for the festival, with booths selling crafts and food, a small stage where a local band played, and tables set up for community meals. Colorful banners hung across the street, and children ran about, faces painted and hands sticky with candy. As they walked through the crowd, Ana Clara was acutely aware of curious glances. A pregnant stranger accompanied by the reclusive Joaquim Mendez was clearly a subject of interest. "Everyone's staring," she murmured. "Let them," Joaquim said, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. "They've been gossiping about me for years. Might as well give them something new to talk about." Despite her initial discomfort, Ana Clara found herself enjoying the festival. The food was delicious, the music lively, and the general atmosphere one of community and celebration. Joaquim stayed close by her side, occasionally explaining local traditions or introducing her to people he knew. "Joaquim Mendez," called a plump woman with silver hair. "I haven't seen you at a festival in years." "Mrs. Alvarez," he greeted her with a respectful nod. "This is Ana Clara. She's helping at the farm." Mrs. Alvarez's eyes took in Ana Clara's pregnant form and her proximity to Joaquim, clearly drawing her own conclusions. "How wonderful to meet you, dear. Any friend of Joaquim's is a friend of mine." Before Ana Clara could correct the misunderstanding, Mrs. Alvarez had moved on to another group, already whispering animatedly, "I think she believes—" Ana Clara began. "I know what she believes," Joaquim cut her off. "Does it bother you?" "Ana." Clara considered the question. "Shouldn't it bother you, people thinking the baby is yours?" Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger, but something equally intense. "No," he said simply. "It doesn't." Before she could respond, a commotion near one of the food stalls caught their attention. A man was arguing loudly with a vendor, his voice carrying across the square. "I said, I want my money back. This isn't fit for pigs." Ana Clara froze, her blood turning cold. She knew that voice, knew it all too well. Joaquim sensed her tension immediately. "What's wrong?" "That man," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "It's Diego." Joaquim's face hardened as he made the connection. The baby's father. Ana Clara nodded, her hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. He can't see me. Please, I can't face him. Without hesitation, Joaquim placed his arm around her shoulders and guided her away from the commotion, using his body to shield her from view. They slipped between two buildings and into a small garden behind the town's church. "Thank you," Ana Clara said, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect—" "Don't apologize," Joaquim said firmly. "You've done nothing wrong." She leaned against the church wall, trying to steady her breathing. "I never thought I'd see him again, especially not here." "Did he hurt you?" Joaquim asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Besides abandoning you?" Ana Clara shook her head. "Not physically. But when I told him about the baby, he said—" She swallowed hard. "He said I'd done it on purpose. To trap him. That I'd ruined his life. That he didn't want anything to do with it or me." Joaquim's fists clenched at his sides. "And his wife? Does she know?" "I don't think so," Ana Clara said. "He threatened to make my life hell if I ever contacted her." She looked up at Joaquim, fear in her eyes. "What if he sees me? What if he's staying in town?" Joaquim stepped closer, his presence solid and reassuring. "He won't bother you, I promise." The conviction in his voice made her believe him, even as part of her mind warned against such trust. She'd trusted before, and look where it had led. "We should go back to the farm," she said. Joaquim studied her face. "Is that what you want, or are you running away because you're afraid?" The question caught her off guard. "Does it matter?" "Yes," he said simply. "It matters to me." Ana Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Then no, I don't want to run away, but I don't want to face him either." "Then we won't go where he is," Joaquim decided. "The festival covers the whole town. We'll just avoid the main square." He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Ana Clara took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and secure. Together, they made their way through the church garden and out to a different street, where smaller festivities continued with less crowding. For the rest of the afternoon, they explored the quieter sides of the festival, a craft exhibition in the community center, a small farmer's market at the edge of town, even a children's puppet show that made Ana Clara laugh despite her earlier fear. Throughout it all, Joaquim stayed close, his hand often finding hers or resting lightly on her back. He was attentive without being overbearing, protective without making her feel helpless. As evening approached, they made their way back to where the trucks were parked. The others wouldn't be ready to leave for hours yet, but Ana Clara was tired, her feet swollen from walking. "I'll take you back," Joaquim said. "The others can drive the second truck home when they're ready." The drive back to Santa Aurora was quiet, but comfortably so. Ana Clara watched the sunset through the passenger window, thinking about the day. The fear of seeing Diego, yes, but also the simple joy of the festival, and most of all, the feeling of Joaquim's hand in hers, steady and sure. When they reached the farm, Joaquim helped her down from the truck, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary. In the fading light, his face seemed softer somehow, the usual guardedness replaced by something warmer. "Thank you," Ana Clara said. "For today. For everything." Joaquim's eyes held hers. "You don't need to thank me." "I want to," she insisted. "When I came here, I didn't expect. I never thought I'd find—" "What?" he asked, his voice low. "What did you find, Ana Clara?" She swallowed, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his hands still at her waist, of the intensity in his gaze. "Safety," she whispered, "and maybe something more." Joaquim's expression changed, vulnerability showing through the cracks in his carefully maintained control. He lifted one hand to gently touch her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with exquisite tenderness. "I thought I'd never feel this way again," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't want to." Ana Clara leaned into his touch, her heart racing. "Feel what way?" Instead of answering, Joaquim slowly bent his head and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Ana Clara froze for a split second, then melted into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing faster. Joachim rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I'm afraid," he confessed quietly, "of feeling this much again, of losing it again." Ana Clara understood completely. "So am I," she whispered back. "But I'm more afraid of never feeling it at all." They stayed that way for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms as night fell around them, two wounded souls finding unexpected healing in each other's embrace. Inside her, the baby kicked vigorously, as if approving the turn of events. Ana Clara smiled against Joachim's chest, realizing that for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she was truly looking forward to the future. The weeks following the Harvest Festival brought changes to Santa Aurora Farm. The most noticeable was the relationship between Joachim and Ana Clara. Though they maintained a certain professionalism around the workers, their growing closeness was undeniable. Meals often found them sitting side by side, their shoulders occasionally touching as they passed dishes. Evenings frequently ended with them on the porch, talking until the stars filled the sky. For Ana Clara, now in her 8th month of pregnancy, these changes were both wonderful and terrifying. The baby would arrive soon, and despite Joachim's assurances that she could stay, uncertainty lingered. What would happen after the birth? What exactly were they to each other? And could she truly allow herself to depend on someone again? One crisp morning, Ana Clara was kneading bread dough in the kitchen when she felt a sharp twinge in her back. She paused, breathing deeply until it passed. "Are you all right?" Rosa asked, noticing her discomfort. "Just a backache," Ana Clara replied, returning to her kneading. "The doctor in town said it's normal at this stage." Rosa gave her a knowing look. "You've been seeing Dr. Martinez?" Ana Clara nodded. "Joachim insisted I go for a checkup after we got closer. He drove me himself." She smiled at the memory of Joachim's nervous pacing in the waiting room, more anxious than she was about the appointment. "And everything's good with the baby?" "Perfect, according to the doctor. He's the right size, right position, just waiting for his time to arrive." Rosa smiled, her eyes warm with approval. "Joachim's different since you came. He smiles now. I hadn't realized how much I missed seeing that." Ana Clara felt her cheeks flush. "We're taking things slowly. There's a lot at stake." "Like your heart?" Rosa asked gently. "Or his?" "Both," Ana Clara admitted. "And the baby's future, and the past that still haunts him." Rosa wiped her hands on her apron and came to stand beside Ana Clara. "You know, when Isabella died, I thought we'd lost Joachim too. He was like a shell of himself, just going through the motions. Even when he started working again, running the farm, making plans, there was no life in his eyes." Ana Clara continued kneading, but her attention was fully on Rosa's words. "The night you arrived," Rosa continued, "I saw something in his face when he looked at you, anger, fear, I wasn't sure. But it was something, not that empty politeness he'd given everyone for 4 years. He resented me," Ana Clara said. "My condition reminded him of what he'd lost." Rosa shook her head. "At first, maybe, but it also reminded him of what he'd been, a man who could care, who could hope." She patted Ana Clara's arm. "And look at him now." As if summoned by their conversation, Joachim appeared in the doorway. His eyes immediately found Ana Clara, a smile softening his features. "Everything okay in here?" he asked. Rosa winked at Ana Clara. "Just fine. We're having a little woman-to-woman chat." Joachim raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "I'm heading to town for supplies. Need anything special?" "More of that muscle salve." "From the pharmacy," Ana Clara said. "My back's been bothering me." Concern flickered across Joachim's face. "Is it bad? Should I call Dr. Martinez?" Ana Clara laughed softly. "It's just normal pregnancy discomfort, but the salve helps." He nodded, but the worry didn't completely leave his eyes. "I'll be back by lunch. Try not to overdo it." After he left, Rosa chuckled. "That man is already acting like a father-to-be." Ana Clara's hands stilled over the dough. "Do you think so?" "I know so," Rosa said confidently. "And so do you." "In town?" Joachim efficiently. gathered the supplies for the farm. His last stop was the pharmacy for Anna Clara's salve. As he waited for the pharmacist to fill the order, he browsed the baby section, looking at the tiny bottles, soft brushes, and mild soaps. "First-time father?" the pharmacist asked as he returned with the salve. Joachim opened his mouth to correct him, then stopped. "Is it that obvious?" the pharmacist laughed. "You've got that look, half terrified, half amazed. When's the big day?" "About 3 weeks," Joachim replied, his heart racing at the thought. In 3 weeks, Anna Clara's baby would be here. A child that wasn't his by blood, but had somehow already claimed a place in his heart. "Well, congratulations," the pharmacist said, handing over the package. "Nothing changes your life like a child." Joachim nodded, paid, and headed for the door. As he stepped outside, he nearly collided with a man entering the pharmacy. A man he recognized from the festival. Diego barely glanced at him, too busy arguing with the woman beside him, who appeared to be his wife. But Joachim recognized him instantly from Anna Clara's fearful reaction at the festival. His hands clenched at his sides, anger surging through him at the thought of this man's cruelty. For a moment, he considered confronting Diego right there, calling him out for abandoning Anna Clara and his unborn child. But what would that accomplish, except to expose Anna Clara's presence in the area? The last thing she needed was Diego showing up at the farm, causing scenes or making demands. No, Joachim decided, walking purposefully to his truck. He wouldn't confront Diego. He would protect Anna Clara from him. She and her baby deserved peace, security, a chance to build a life without fear or shame. As he drove back toward Santa Aurora, Joachim found himself making plans. The unused room adjacent to his could become a nursery. The old crib in the attic, the one he and Isabella had prepared with such joy, could be cleaned and set up. The farm's financial records would need updating to include provisions for Anna Clara and the child. He caught himself, easing his foot off the accelerator. Was he getting ahead of himself? Anna Clara had only been at Santa Aurora for a few weeks. They'd shared one kiss, tender moments, growing feelings, but they hadn't discussed a future together, not concretely. What if she didn't want the same things? What if she was only turning to him out of gratitude or necessity? The thought chilled him. He couldn't bear to open his heart completely, only to discover she saw him merely as a safe harbor in a storm. By the time he reached the farm, Joachim had decided he needed to talk to Anna Clara. Really talk. About what they wanted, what they expected, what they feared. No more dancing around their feelings or assuming they understood each other without words. But when he entered the kitchen, he found Rosa alone, looking worried. "Where's Anna Clara?" he asked, setting down the supplies. "In her room resting," Rosa replied. "Her back pain got worse. She said it was nothing, but—" Rosa shook her head. "I'm not so sure." Joachim frowned, heading straight for Anna Clara's room. He knocked softly on the door. "Anna Clara." "It's me. Can I come in?" "Yes," came her voice, sounding strained. He opened the door to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, her face pale with discomfort. "What's wrong?" he asked, moving quickly to her side. "Just back pain," she insisted, though her grimace told a different story. "It comes and goes." Joachim sat beside her, taking her hand. "How often is it coming and going?" Anna Clara looked at him, sudden understanding dawning in her eyes. "You think it's labor pains," he finished for her. "Yes, I do. But it's too early," she protested. "I still have 3 weeks." "Babies don't always follow schedules," Joachim said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the fear building inside him. "How long have you been feeling these pains?" "Since this morning," she admitted. "But they weren't bad at first, just in the last hour." She broke off, her face contorting as another pain seized her. Joachim held her hand as she breathed through it, counting silently. When she relaxed again, he stood, decisively. "We're going to the hospital," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "Better to be safe." "But what if it's nothing?" Anna Clara protested. "I'll feel foolish. Then we'll come home again," he said simply. "But if it's not nothing—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes conveyed everything words couldn't. His fear for her, his concern, his love. Anna Clara nodded, finally accepting the situation. Let me get my bag. I packed one just in case. Joachim watched as she slowly stood and retrieved a small duffel bag from the closet. His mind raced with memories of another day, another drive to the hospital. Isabella had been complaining of headaches. He'd waited too long to insist she see a doctor. By the time they discovered the aneurysm, it was too late. He wouldn't make the same mistake again. I'll tell Rosa where we're going, he said, forcing himself back to the present. Can you walk to the truck or should I carry you? Anna Clara managed, a smile despite her discomfort. I can walk. I'm having a baby, not dying. The word sent a chill through him, but he nodded and went to inform Rosa of the situation. Within minutes, they were in his truck, heading toward the hospital in town. Joachim, Anna Clara said after they'd been driving for a few minutes, her voice tight with more than physical pain. What if he's there? He didn't need to ask who she meant. Diego won't matter, he said firmly. All that matters is you and the baby being safe. She seemed to accept this, falling silent except for her controlled breathing when the pains came. Joachim drove as fast as was safe, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Dr. Martinez confirmed that Anna Clara was in labor, though still in the early stages. The baby's coming a bit early, he told them, but not dangerously so. Everything looks normal. Joachim stayed by Anna Clara's side as they moved her to a delivery room, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement. When the nurse asked if he was the father, he hesitated only a moment before saying, yes. Hours passed. The pains intensified. Anna Clara gripped Joachim's hand so tightly he thought she might break his fingers, but he never complained, never left her side. I'm scared, she whispered during a brief respite between contractions. What if I can't do this? You can, he assured her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. You're the strongest person I know, Anna Clara, and I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. She searched his face, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and gratitude. Promise? I promise, he replied, meaning it more than any words he'd ever spoken. No matter what happens, I'll be here, for you and for him. Another contraction seized her, more powerful than before. Dr. Martinez, who had been checking her progress, announced, It's time to push, Anna Clara. Your baby is ready to meet you. What followed was a blur of effort, pain, and encouragement. Anna Clara pushed with all her strength, her face contorted, her body straining. Joachim held her up, supported her, breathed with her, believing in her when her own faith faltered, and then suddenly a cry filled the room, strong, indignant, full of life. Anna Clara collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face, as Dr. Martinez placed a tiny red-faced bundle on her chest. Congratulations, the doctor said, smiling. You have a healthy baby boy. Anna Clara stared down at her son, so in wonder, her fingers gently tracing his features, the button nose, the rosebud mouth, the dark swirl of hair on his head. He's perfect, she whispered. Joachim stood beside them, his own eyes damp with tears. The sight of Anna Clara holding her newborn son broke something open inside him, a door he'd kept locked since Isabella's death. Behind that door lay not just grief, but the capacity for joy, for hope, for a future he'd thought forever denied to him. He is perfect, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion, just like his mother. Anna Clara looked up at him, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. Would you like to hold him? Joachim hesitated, suddenly afraid. What right did he have to hold this child? He wasn't the boy's father. He wasn't anyone to him, not really. But Anna Clara was already lifting the baby toward him, and reflexively, his arms came out to receive the tiny bundle. The weight of the newborn in his arms was at once strange and familiar, terrifying and right. The baby's eyes, still unfocused, seemed to look up at him with complete trust. Hello, little one, Joachim said softly. Welcome to the world. The baby yawned, his tiny fingers flexing against the blanket. Something fierce and protective surged through Joachim's heart, a love so sudden and complete it took his breath away. He needs a name, he said, looking at Noor. Anna Clara. She nodded, her eyes never leaving her son's face. I was thinking it's Miguel. It was my father's name. Miguel, Joachim repeated, testing the sound. It's a good name, strong, like he'll be. As they gazed down at baby Miguel, a nurse entered the room. "Excuse me," she said apologetically, "but there's a man in the waiting room asking about the baby. Says he's the father." Ana Clara's face drained of color. "Diego," she whispered, panic rising in her eyes. "How did he know?" "It's a small town," Joaquim said grimly, carefully handing Miguel back to his mother. "News travels fast." "I don't want to see him," Ana Clara said, her arms tightening protectively around her son. "Please, Joaquim, don't let him in here." Joaquim's jaw set in a hard line. "I'll handle this. You rest." He bent and pressed a kiss to her forehead, then to the top of Miguel's downy head. "I'll be right back." In the waiting room, he found Diego pacing impatiently. Beside him sat a woman Joaquim recognized from town, Diego's wife, looking uncomfortable and upset. "Where is she?" Diego demanded when he saw Joaquim. "The nurse said Ana Clara had her baby. I have a right to see my son." Joaquim stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "You lost any rights when you abandoned them both." Diego's face flushed with anger. "That's not for you to decide. I'm the father." "Are you?" Joaquim asked coldly. "A father is more than just biology. A father protects, provides, loves. What have you done except cause pain?" "This isn't your business," Diego snarled. "Ana Clara worked for you, that's all. Unless—" His eyes narrowed. "Unless you've been sleeping with her too." Joaquim's hands clenched at his sides, but he kept his control. "Ana Clara doesn't want to see you. Neither does her son. If you have legal rights you want to pursue, talk to a lawyer. But right now, you're not setting foot in that room." Diego took a step forward, as if to push past Joaquim, but his wife caught his arm. "Diego, please," she said, her voice strained. "Let's go. This isn't helping anything." For a moment it seemed like Diego might ignore her, might escalate the confrontation. But something in Joaquim's stance, the absolute certainty that he would protect Ana Clara and Miguel at any cost, seemed to register. Diego stepped back, his face twisted with frustration. "This isn't over," he warned. "That's my son." "No," Joaquim replied evenly. "He's Ana Clara's son, and she deserves better than you." With a final glare, Diego turned and stalked out of the waiting room, his wife hurrying after him with an apologetic backward glance. Joaquim remained standing until they were out of sight, then sagged slightly, the tension draining from his body. When he returned to Ana Clara's room, she was feeding Miguel, her face still tense with worry. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "Is he gone?" Joaquim nodded, taking a seat beside the bed. "He's gone. I don't think he'll bother you again right away, but—" He hesitated. "Ana Clara, he might try to claim parental rights. We should be prepared for that." She looked down at Miguel, now sleeping peacefully at her breast. "He doesn't deserve to be part of Miguel's life, not after what he did." "No, he doesn't," Joaquim agreed. "But legally—" "I know," she sighed. "We'll deal with that if it happens." She studied Joaquim's face. "Thank you for being here, for standing up to him, for everything." Joaquim took her free hand in his. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," he said simply. Ana Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I never expected any of this. When I came to Santa Aurora, I was just looking for a place to hide, to survive. I never thought I'd find someone like you." Joaquim's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "I never thought I'd feel this way again after Isabella. I was afraid to. But you and Miguel—" He struggled to find the right words. "You've brought something back to me that I thought was gone forever." "Hope?" she suggested. "Yes," he nodded. "Hope and joy and—" He hesitated, then decided to take the risk. "And love, Ana Clara. I love you." Her breath caught, her eyes widening. "Joaquim." "You don't have to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I know it's sudden. I know there's so much to consider. But I needed you to know how I feel." Ana Clara looked from his face to Miguel's, her expression a mixture of wonder and vulnerability. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "not of loving you. I think I already do. But of trusting this feeling. Trusting that it won't disappear." "I understand," Joaquim said, and he did. They both carried scars. Both knew how quickly happiness could be stolen away. "We can take all the time you need. The important thing is that you and Miguel are safe, and that you know you have a home at Santa Aurora for as long as you want." De Ana Clara nodded, her eyes growing heavy with exhaustion. "Stay with us?" she asked softly. "Just until we fall asleep?" "I'll stay," Joaquim promised, settling more comfortably in the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand. "Rest now. I'll be here when you wake up." As Ana Clara drifted off to sleep, Miguel still cradled in her arms, Joaquim watched over them both, his heart full to bursting with emotions he'd thought forever lost to him. Whatever the future held, Diego's potential legal challenges, the adjustments of life with a newborn, the gradual building of trust between him and Ana Clara, he would face it all gladly because the alternative, life without them, was unthinkable. 3 days later, Joaquim brought Ana Clara and Miguel home to Santa Aurora. Rosa had prepared a welcome, hanging a banner in the kitchen and preparing Ana Clara's favorite meal. The farmhands stopped by throughout the day to admire the new baby, each one awkwardly gentle with the tiny bundle, each one grinning foolishly when Miguel grasped their calloused fingers in his tiny hand. That evening, after everyone else had gone to their quarters, Joaquim found Ana Clara on the porch, rocking Miguel gently in one of the old wooden rockers. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She smiled up at him, patting the rocker beside hers. "Please do." He sat, content to watch them in the gathering dusk. Miguel was already showing signs of Ana Clara's features, the same determined chin, the same long eyelashes. But there was something of Diego there too, in the shape of his nose, the curve of his ears. It didn't matter to Joaquim, the boy was perfect, regardless of whose blood ran in his veins. "I've been thinking," he said after a comfortable silence. "The room next to mine would make a good nursery. It gets morning sun, and it's close enough that you'd hear him if he cried in the night." Ana Clara looked at him curiously. "You want us to move upstairs? From my room in the back?" Joaquim nodded. "If you'd like to. The back room is small and you'll need more space as Miguel grows." She considered this, her gaze returning to the sleeping infant in her arms. "That's very generous of you." "It's not generosity," he said quietly. "It's hope. Planning for a future I want very much. A future with you and Miguel." Ana Clara's eyes met his, searching. "Are you sure, Joaquim? Really sure? Taking on another man's child—" "Miguel isn't another man's child to me," Joaquim interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "He's yours. And He paused, gathering his courage. "I'd like him to be mine too, in every way that matters." Ana Clara's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Joaquim moved from his rocker to kneel before hers, taking one of her hands in both of his. "I'm saying that I love you, Ana Clara, that I want to build a life with you and Miguel, that I want to be a father to him, a husband to you. If you'll have me." Tears filled Ana Clara's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "It's so fast," she whispered. "We've known each other such a short time." "Time doesn't always measure the depth of feeling," Joaquim said. "I know what's in my heart. I know what I want. But if you need more time—" "No," she interrupted, her voice suddenly steady. "I don't need more time. I need you, Joaquim. I love you too." Joy blazed through him bright as sunrise. "Then you'll marry me?" Ana Clara laughed softly, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Joaquim rose enough to kiss her, gently but with all the love in his heart. When they parted, he settled back on his heels, looking at Miguel with tenderness. "He'll need a birth certificate," he said. "I want my name on it as his father." Ana Clara's eyes widened. "But Diego—" "We'll deal with Diego if we have to," Joaquim said firmly. "But I want the world to know that Miguel is my son. In every way that counts." Ana Clara smiled through her tears. "Our son," she corrected. "Our family." The word echoed between them, full of meaning, full of promise. Family. Something neither of them had truly had in too long. Something they'd both stopped believing might be possible again. As night fell over Santa Aurora Farm, they sat together on the porch, making plans, sharing dreams, watching over the sleeping child who had in his own way brought them together. Two broken people, finding wholeness in each other. Two lonely souls, building a family, suddenly, unexpectedly, perfectly. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustments and joy. The room next to Joaquim's was transformed into a nursery, painted a cheerful yellow, the color of sunshine, Ana Clara said, remembering the yarn Joaquim had bought her. The old crib from the attic was cleaned and set up, its dark wood gleaming with polish, new bedding replacing the yellowed sheets that had waited for a baby who never came. Miguel thrived, growing stronger each day. Ana Clara recovered her strength quickly, eager to return to her work in the kitchen and garden, though now she carried Miguel with her in a sling Rosa had fashioned, or left him napping under the watchful eyes of whoever was nearby. Word spread through town that Joaquim Mendez was engaged to his pretty kitchen helper and planned to adopt her baby as his own. Some tongues wagged, of course, but most people were simply happy to see the change in Joaquim, the smile that now came easily to his face, the way he proudly showed off his son to anyone who visited the farm. Rosa, more than anyone, approved of the match. "I always knew there was a good heart under all that grief," she told Ana Clara one afternoon as they prepared dinner. "You just needed to remind him it was still beating." The only shadow on their happiness was Diego. True to his warning, he had consulted a lawyer about his parental rights. A letter arrived at the farm, formal and threatening, claiming that Diego Martinez was the biological father of Miguel Garcia and demanding visitation rights. Ana Clara had crumpled the letter in her fist, tears of anger and fear in her eyes. He didn't want anything to do with Miguel before he was born. Why now? Joaquim, reading over her shoulder, had a grim suspicion. "His wife," he said. "She looked guilty in the hospital. I think she's pushing him to acknowledge his son." "Or maybe he just can't stand to see us happy," Ana Clara said bitterly. "He threw us away, but now he can't bear the thought of someone else loving Miguel, of someone else loving me." Joaquim had taken her in his arms, holding her close. "We'll fight this," he promised. "Together." They consulted a lawyer of their own, who advised them that while Diego had certain biological rights, Joaquim's adoption of Miguel, once they were married, would strengthen their position considerably. The lawyer also suggested that they document Diego's abandonment and refusal to support Ana Clara during her pregnancy, as this might influence a judge's decision regarding visitation. As difficult as this situation was, it drew Joaquim and Ana Clara even closer. Their shared determination to protect Miguel, to give him the stable, loving home he deserved, reinforced the bond between them. Each night, after checking on the sleeping baby in his crib, they would sit together in Joaquim's study, now their study, planning their defense, discussing their upcoming wedding, dreaming of the future they would build at Santa Aurora. "I never thanked you," Ana Clara said one evening, as they sat together on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. "For what?" Joaquim asked, his fingers idly stroking her hair. "For that first day, in the garden, when you told me I didn't need to prove anything, that I just needed to take care of myself and the baby." Joaquim smiled at the memory. "You looked so determined, kneeling in the dirt with your belly in the way, trying to pull those stubborn weeds. I was terrified you'd send me away," she admitted. "I needed the job so desperately." "And now?" he asked softly. "What do you need now?" Ana Clara lifted her head to look at him, her eyes full of love. "Just you," she said simply. "You and Miguel and this life we're building. That's all I'll ever need." Joaquim kissed her then, pouring all his love, all his gratitude for her presence in his life into the embrace. When they parted, both a little breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "You were right, you know," he murmured. "That night in the kitchen, when you said hope is dangerous, but we keep doing it anyway." Ana Clara smiled, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "And was it worth it? The risk of hoping again?" Joaquim's answer was in his eyes, in the tender way he held her, in the future they were building together at Santa Aurora Farm. "Always," he whispered. "You and Miguel are always worth it." Later that night, as Ana Clara slept peacefully beside him, Joaquim lay awake, listening to the soft sounds of her breathing, and through the slightly open door, the occasional sighs and movements of Miguel in his crib. His family, his future. His heart, once so broken he'd thought it beyond repair, now full to overflowing. Outside the window, moonlight silvered the fields of Santa Aurora, the land that had sustained his family for generations. Soon, it would sustain a new generation, Miguel, growing strong and loved, and perhaps in time brothers and sisters to share his childhood adventures. Joaquim smiled in the darkness, no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Whatever challenges they faced, Diego's legal threats, the adjustments of marriage, the everyday work of running the farm, they would face them together. Ana Clara had given him back his hope, his joy, his ability to love, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted it. With that thought warming his heart, Joaquim finally drifted to sleep, his arms around the woman who had arrived on his doorstep with nothing but a backpack and a baby on the way, and had given him everything he never knew he was missing. The morning of Joaquim and Ana Clara's wedding dawned bright and clear, the October sun casting a golden glow over Santa Aurora farm. In the main house, activity buzzed as Rosa and the other women helped Ana Clara prepare. The ceremony would be simple, just family and close friends gathered in the garden where sunflowers still bloomed despite the advancing autumn. "Hold still," Rosa chided gently as she pinned white flowers in Ana Clara's hair. "You're as fidgety as Miguel when he needs changing." Ana Clara laughed, but her hands continued to smooth the skirt of her dress, a simple ivory gown that Rosa had altered from one of her own. "I can't help it. I never thought I'd be getting married, let alone to the most eligible bachelor in the county," Elena teased, cradling 4-month-old Miguel in her arms. The baby was dressed in a tiny white suit, his dark eyes alert and curious as he took in the activity around him. "It's not his eligibility I care about," Ana Clara said softly. "It's his heart, his goodness." Rosa stepped back to admire her handiwork. "There. You look beautiful, my dear." Ana Clara turned to the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Her cheeks were flushed with happiness, her eyes bright. The simple dress flattered her figure, which had almost returned to normal after Miguel's birth. The white flowers in her dark hair completed the picture of a radiant bride. "Thank you, Rosa," she said, turning to embrace the older woman. "For everything, for accepting me from the first day, for helping me find my place here." Rosa patted her back, blinking back tears. "You found your own place, child. You and that precious boy of yours." She glanced at Miguel, who was now attempting to grab at Elena's earrings. "You brought life back to this farm, back to Joaquim." A knock at the door interrupted the emotional moment. Carlos poked his head in, his usually gruff face softened with a smile. "It's time," he announced. "Everyone's waiting in the garden, Ana." Clara took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. "How is he, Joaquim?" Carlos grinned, pacing like a caged tiger, but smiling. Never seen the boss smile so much as he has these past months. Relief flooded through Ana Clara. Despite all the evidence of Joaquim's love, part of her still feared this was too good to be true, that he might realize he'd made a mistake, that he didn't really want to take on another man's child, that the ghost of Isabella would always stand between them. "Let me take Miguel down first," Elena said, heading for the door. "Then you can make your entrance." As Elena and Carlos left, Rosa turned to Ana Clara one last time. "Ready to become Mrs. Mendez?" Ana Clara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "More than ready." Together they descended the stairs and headed toward the garden where their new future awaited. Joaquim stood beneath an arch of autumn flowers, trying to control his nerves. Around him the garden had been transformed, rows of chairs for the guests, garlands of flowers and ribbons, a path laid with white petals leading to where he stood with the minister. He scanned the small crowd, farm workers and their families, neighbors from surrounding properties, a few friends from town. At the front, Rosa's husband held Miguel, the baby surprisingly calm, despite the unusual surroundings. When the music began, Carlos's son playing a guitar, Joaquim's heart leapt into his throat. Elena appeared first, walking slowly down the petal path, a basket of flower petals in her hands which she scattered as she went. And then, at last, Ana Clara. His breath caught at the sight of her. She was beautiful, not in the polished, perfect way Isabella had been, but in an earthy, real way that touched his soul. Her dress was simple, her only adornments the flowers in her hair and the love shining in her eyes. Rosa walked beside her, fulfilling the role of family since Ana Clara had no one else. As she approached, Joachim felt a peace settle over him, replacing the nervousness of moments before. This was right. This was meant to be. The long, lonely years after Isabella's death had led him here, to this moment, to this woman, to the family they were creating together. When Ana Clara reached him, he took her hands in his. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "So are you," she replied with a small smile, her eyes taking in his clean suit, his freshly trimmed hair, the love written plainly on his face. The minister began the ceremony, his words washing over them as they stood together, hands clasped, eyes locked. The promises they made, to love, honor, cherish in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do them part, were not mere words but solemn vows they both intended to keep. When it came, time for the rings, Joachim's hands trembled slightly as he slipped the simple gold band onto Ana Clara's finger. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Ana Clara's eyes glistened with tears as she placed a matching band on his finger, repeating the words that bound them together as husband and wife. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister announced. "You may kiss your bride." Joachim cupped Ana Clara's face gently in his hands and kissed her with all the love in his heart. The small gathering erupted in cheers and applause, none louder than Carlos and the other farmhands who had watched their boss's transformation from grieving recluse to joyful husband and father. As they turned to face their guests, Rosa's husband approached with Miguel. The baby reached for his mother, his tiny face breaking into a gummy smile of recognition. Ana Clara took him in her arms, and Joachim wrapped his arms around them both, a family, officially and completely. The celebration that followed was full of laughter, music and food prepared by Rosa and the other women. Tables had been set up on the lawn, laden with dishes that represented both Joachim's Portuguese heritage and Ana Clara's family recipes. Wine flowed freely, toasts were made, and as the sun began to set, Carlos and the other workers surprised everyone by setting up strings of lights in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere for dancing. Joachim led Ana Clara in the first dance, Miguel watching from Rosa's arms. As they swayed together to the gentle music, he couldn't help but marvel at how his life had changed in just a few short months. "Happy?" Ana Clara asked, her head resting against his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible," he replied honestly. "You've given me back everything I thought was lost forever, Ana Clara. A family, a future, joy." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the twinkling lights above. "You've given me the same. Safety, belonging, love." She glanced over at Miguel, now dozing in Rosa's lap. "And you've given our son a father who will love him as his own." Joachim's heart swelled at her words. Our son. It was true. In his heart, Miguel was as much his child as if he'd been there from conception. The legal adoption would make it official once the judge signed the papers, but the emotional bond was already complete and unbreakable. As the evening wore on, guests began to depart, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Finally, only the immediate household remained: Rosa and her husband, Carlos and his family, Elena and the other house staff. They insisted on handling the cleanup, shooing Joachim and Ana Clara toward the house with Miguel. "Go on," Rosa urged. "Start your married life. We'll take care of everything here." With grateful smiles, the newlyweds retreated to the main house. Ana Clara put Miguel to bed in his nursery, singing softly as she rocked him to sleep. Joachim stood in the doorway, watching this nightly ritual with a full heart. Once Miguel was settled, they went to their bedroom, their shared room now, though in truth, Ana Clara had been sleeping there for weeks already. The farmhouse had many empty rooms, but they had chosen to make Joachim's large master bedroom their own. redecorating it together to reflect their shared taste. Simpler than Isabella's elaborate decor had been, warmer and more inviting. "Mrs. Mendes," Joaquim said softly, pulling Ana Clara into his arms. "My wife." She smiled up at him, her hands resting on his chest. "My husband. It still doesn't seem real." "It's real," he assured her, bending to kiss her with growing passion. "Very real." Their wedding night was everything both had hoped for. Tender, passionate, a perfect expression of the love that had grown between them over the past months. Later, as Ana Clara slept in his arms, Joaquim thought about the twists of fate that had brought them together, her desperate need for work and shelter, his reluctant decision to hire her despite her pregnancy, the slow building of trust and affection between them. He had lost so much when Isabella died, not just his wife and unborn child, but his faith in life, in goodness, in the possibility of happiness. Ana Clara hadn't replaced what was lost. She had given him something new, something different but equally precious. A second chance, a new family, a future he could embrace without fear. With that thought warming his heart, Joaquim joined his wife in sleep, content in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring another day of building their life together at Santa Aurora Farm. The sound of a car engine broke the morning quiet 3 days later. Joaquim and Ana Clara, enjoying a late breakfast on the porch while Miguel napped, exchanged concerned glances. They weren't expecting visitors, and the farm was far enough from town that no one came by accident. "I'll see who it is," Joaquim said, rising from his chair. But before he could reach the steps, a familiar car came into view, parking near the house with a spray of gravel. Diego Ana Clara stood quickly, moving to Joaquim's side. "What is he doing here?" Joaquim's arm went around her protectively. "I don't know, but he's not welcome." Diego emerged from the car alone, his face set in an expression that was hard to read. Not the anger they expected, but something more complex. He approached the porch slowly, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "I heard you got married," he said without preamble, looking at Ana Clara. She lifted her chin. "Yes, Joaquim and I were married 3 days ago." Diego nodded, his eyes moving to Joaquim. "And you're adopting Miguel." "I am," Joaquim confirmed, his voice level but firm. "The papers are already filed." Silence stretched between them, tense and expectant. Finally, Diego sighed, some of the stiffness leaving his posture. "I came to tell you that I'm withdrawing my petition for visitation rights," he said. Ana Clara gasped softly. "What? Why?" Diego looked uncomfortable. "Marta, my wife, she wanted me to do right by the boy. She's a good woman, better than I deserve, but—" He hesitated. "I've been watching you two, asking around town. Everyone says the same thing, that you're good parents, that the baby is happy and healthy, that you're a real family." He scuffed at the gravel with his shoe, looking more like a chastened boy than the threatening figure they'd feared. "I wouldn't be a good father, I know that. I proved that when I walked away. Miguel deserves better." Joaquim's arm tightened around Ana Clara, both in support and in an effort to contain his own emotions. Relief, disbelief, lingering anger at what this man had put her through. "Why should we believe you?" Ana Clara asked, her voice steady despite the tremor Joaquim could feel running through her body. "You threatened legal action. You demanded visitation rights." Diego had the grace to look ashamed. "I was angry, jealous, maybe. Not of you," he added quickly, "but of—" He gestured vaguely at the farm, the house, at Joaquim. "Of this, of him, of the family you were building without me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope, holding it out. "Here. It's a formal withdrawal of my petition, signed and notarized, and a relinquishment of parental rights to facilitate the adoption." Joaquim stepped down to take the envelope, opening it to verify the contents. The documents appeared genuine, legal papers with official seals, Diego's signature clear at the bottom of each page. "I don't understand," Ana Clara said, her voice softer now, confusion replacing fear. "Why the change of heart? Diego looked past them to the farmhouse, his expression distant. Marta's expecting, our third. I already have 2 children I barely see because I work so much. Adding a third to our family, it's enough. And Miguel? He paused. Miguel has a father. A good one, from what I hear. Joaquim felt a surge of complex emotions. Pride at the acknowledgement, residual anger at the man who had caused Ana Clara so much pain, grudging respect for this unexpected act of decency. Thank you, he said, his voice gruff but sincere. For putting Miguel's needs first. Diego nodded. Just take care of him. Give him what I couldn't. We will, Ana Clara said, her own anger softening into something like pity for the man who would never know the joy of his son's first smile, first steps, first words. He'll always be loved. Diego turned to go, then hesitated. One more thing. There's a college fund set up in his name. Not much yet, but I'll add to it when I can. It's the least I can do. Without waiting for a response, he got into his car and drove away, leaving Joaquim and Ana Clara standing on the porch steps, stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Did that really just happen? Ana Clara asked, staring after the disappearing car. Joaquim looked down at the papers in his hand. It really did. He's given up his rights. Miguel is legally free to be our son, yours and mine, with no complications. Ana. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I never thought he would do that, never. People can surprise you, Joaquim said, leading her back to their seats on the porch. Sometimes in good ways, even after they've disappointed you. They sat in silence, for a few minutes absorbing the magnitude of the moment. The last legal obstacle to their family's security had been removed. Miguel would grow up as Joaquim Mendez's son, with no shadow of another father's claim hanging over their happiness. I should feel only relief, Ana Clara said finally. But part of me is sad for him, for what he'll miss. Joaquim took her hand, understanding in his eyes. That's because you have a generous heart, my love, even after all he put you through. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm just glad. It's over. Now we can truly start our life together without fear. As if on cue, Miguel's cry came through the baby monitor they'd set on the porch table. Ana Clara stood to go to him, but Joaquim touched her arm. Let me, he said, rising. I want to hold my son. Ana Clara smiled, her heart full to bursting, with love for this man who had become everything to her. Husband, partner, father to her child. Our son, she corrected gently. Always our son. Joaquim kissed her quickly, then went inside to tend to Miguel. Ana Clara remained on the porch, her gaze sweeping over the farm that was now truly her home. Santa Aurora, where she had arrived, desperate and alone, and had found everything she'd never dared to hope for. The sound of Joaquim's voice came through the monitor, gentle and loving as he spoke to Miguel. There's my boy. Did you have a good nap? Your mama and I were just talking about you, about how lucky we are to have you. Ana Clara closed her eyes, savoring the moment. From the depths of despair to the heights of joy, her journey had been unexpected, sometimes painful, but ultimately blessed beyond measure. 5 years passed, bringing changes both subtle and profound to Santa Aurora Farm. The most obvious was the addition to the family. 2-year-old Isabella Rose Mendez, named E. for Joaquim's first wife, but with a personality all her own. With her mother's dark curls and her father's serious eyes, little Bella was adored by everyone, especially her big brother Miguel. Miguel, now nearly 6 and soon to start school, had grown into a sturdy, curious boy with a natural affinity for the farm. He followed Joaquim everywhere, asking endless questions, helping with age-appropriate tasks, already showing the same connection to the land that ran in the Mendez family for generations. Though not biologically, Joaquim's son, Miguel, had absorbed his mannerisms, his work ethic, his quiet strength. The legal adoption had been finalized without issue after Diego's withdrawal of his petition, and Miguel knew no father but Joaquim, a fact that filled both his parents with quiet gratitude every day. On a warm Sunday afternoon, the family gathered, on a blanket beneath the same oak tree where Ana Clara had once sorted beans, pregnant and afraid, uncertain of her future. Now she sat with Bella in her lap, watching as Joaquim taught Miguel how to fly a kite in the open field beyond the garden. Higher. "Papa, make it go higher," Miguel shouted, jumping with excitement as the colorful kite soared upward. "You try," Joaquim encouraged, handing the string to his son. "Gentle now, don't pull too hard." Ana Clara smiled at the scene, her husband's patient. "Instruction," her son's determined face as he concentrated on the task. A perfect moment in a life now filled with such moments, large and small. "Hungry," announced Bella, patting her mother's cheek to get her attention. "Cookie, Mama." Ana Clara laughed, reaching for the picnic basket. "Yes, little one, cookie time for everyone, I think." She called to Joaquim and Miguel, who secured the kite string to a stake in the ground and came running to join them on the blanket. Joaquim dropped a kiss on Bella's head, then on Ana Clara's lips, before settling beside them. "You're getting good with that kite, Miguel," Ana Clara praised, handing her son a cookie. "Papa says I'm a natural," Miguel declared proudly, leaning against Joaquim's side. "Just like him." Joaquim's arm went around the boy, his face softening with love. "That's right, son, just like me." As they enjoyed their snack, Rosa approached from the main house waving a letter. "Mail just came," she announced. "Something from the bank looks important." Joaquim took the envelope, opening it with curious fingers. As he read, a smile spread across his face. "Good news?" Ana Clara asked. "The best," he confirmed, passing her the letter. "The loan for the winery extension was approved. We can break ground next month." Ana Clara's eyes widened as she scanned. "The document." "Joaquim, that's wonderful. Your dream, it's finally happening. It was a dream long deferred. The expansion of Santa Aurora to include a small winery, an idea Joaquim had first conceived with Isabella years ago, then abandoned in his grief. Ana Clara had encouraged him to revive the plan, believing in his vision, supporting him as he researched, planned, and finally applied for the necessary financing. "Our dream," he corrected, squeezing her hand. "None of this would be possible without you." It was true in more ways than one. Ana Clara had not only encouraged the winery project, but had become an essential partner in running the farm. Her garden had expanded to provide vegetables for several local restaurants. Her preserves and baked goods sold at the weekend market in town, bringing in additional income that had helped secure the loan. "Can I help build it, Papa?" Miguel asked, eagerly. "I'm strong." Joaquim ruffled the boy's hair. "Of course you can. Every Mendez man has helped build something on this farm. It's tradition." Miguel beamed at being included in the Mendez tradition, while Bella, not to be left out, declared, "Me help too." "And you will, Princess," Joaquim assured her. "We need someone to supervise, make sure we're doing everything right." As the children chattered excitedly about the new project, Joaquim's eyes met Ana Clara's over their heads. The look they exchanged was one of perfect understanding, of shared joy, of gratitude for the life they had built together. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Joaquim and Ana Clara sat on the porch swing, a blanket draped over their laps against the slight evening chill. The farm stretched out before them, peaceful in the moonlight, full of promise. "I never thanked you," Joaquim said, his arm around her shoulders. "For what?" Ana Clara asked, nestling closer to his warmth. "For walking up that driveway 6 years, Ego. For being brave enough to start over, to try again, even after everything you'd been through." Ana Clara smiled at the memory. How terrified she'd been. How desperate, how certain that Santa Aurora was just a temporary shelter until she could find something better. "I should be thanking you," she said, "for giving me a chance, for seeing past my condition to who I really was, for loving Miguel as your own." Joaquim's hand found hers beneath the blanket, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "Do you remember what you whispered to him that first night? I overheard you when I walked past your room." Ana Clara nodded, tears pricking her eyes at the memory. "I told him it was just for a while, that we could manage. And look at you now," Joaquim said softly. "Both of you, managing beautifully. Forever." "Forever," Ana Clara agreed, turning, her face up for his kiss. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the farm that was their heritage and their future stood solid and enduring. And between them, the love that had begun so unexpectedly, so tentatively, had grown into something as natural and necessary as the air they breathed. A kitchen helper with a baby on the way. A grieving widower afraid to love again. Two broken souls who had found healing in each other's arms. A family suddenly and perfectly formed from the fragments of shattered dreams. As the porch swing gently rocked, Joaquim and Ana Clara Mendez held each other close, grateful for the journey that had brought them home. "It was always meant to be this way," Joaquim murmured against her hair. "You, me, our children, this farm, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together." Ana Clara smiled, contentment washing over her like a gentle wave. "A family," she whispered. "Our family." "Suddenly," he agreed. "But forever." And in that moment, under the canopy of stars that had witnessed their beginning and would watch over their future, they knew with absolute certainty that this was true. What had come to them suddenly, unexpectedly, even reluctantly at first, had grown into a love as enduring as the land they tended, as promising as the seasons that brought new life each year, as complete as the family they had created together at Santa Aurora Farm. The end.